Hey Springfield, it's Dominique with On the Scene, and today I got a great interview with Eddie Gomucio. He's the creator of Queen City Shout. He's a 25-year veteran of the music scene, and he has some great advice for all you that are trying to start off. So just let's take a look. Okay, Eddie, thank you for joining us. So I want to start off with how are you involved in the Springfield scene now?
Well, I feel like I've been kind of professionally involved for the last 25 years. Mostly as a singer, songwriter, musician. Queen City Shout kind of happened later in my career. We celebrated our 10th year this year. And so I would say probably roughly through that 25 years, about halfway through is where that sort of idea got planted for the festival and stuff. But yeah, and not just as a singer-songwriter and a musician over the last 25 years, maybe a little less than that, but you could round it up. But I'd say as a fan too, it was really one of the reasons why I even started the festival.
Well, we'll get into what Queen City Shout is all about. But I have a few questions for you just before that. So what is your day job? I mean, what else do you do besides being a singer-songwriter?
I'm an educator. I have been an educator for SPS for, this is my 11th year. So I teach secondary. And I am in the world language department. I'm a Spanish teacher. So I've been a Spanish teacher for the last 11 years. That's my day job.
Nice.
And no, it's been great. It's been great. I love it. In hindsight, I think looking back, like the time when I was actually kind of touring a lot and doing more of that as a band, I was working in retail to support my music career. But in hindsight, I was kind of like, man, the teaching gig, it's like having your summers off. It's like I should have been teaching this whole time and I could have just toured every summer.
That would be a great setup.
Yeah, so it's nice, especially, married now with family and kiddos, it's nice to have our summers off together and Christmas and spring breaks and things like that. But yeah, been teaching for 11 years, and before that, when I was still doing music, worked in retail.
Worked in retail, wow. So what are some of the bands that you've been in through the years?
The first band, My Chick Cecile, and we were together for 5 years. We started in 96, put out a CD in 99, and I think we officially split up in 2001. So before My Chick Cecile, there were versions of the band. I remember we play like at the Magic Bean.
Oh yeah.
Wherever the location was at that point.
Yeah. Had a few different locations, if they're even still around. I don't know.
Yeah. And we, that was funny back then, early on, because like one week we named ourselves Tree, and another day or another week we had a different name. And honestly, My Chick Cecile was a bad attempt at coming up with a name that no one else had. Because we didn't want to be an ordinary name, because we thought, well, by the time we become rich and famous, maybe some other band will have that name, and then we'll have to change our name. So it was just like the extreme version of like, we were brainstorming one day at practice, and I was like, what about My Chick Cecile? And, we were young and dumb, and looking back, I suppose it's a bit derogatory, but it was coming from this idea of like, my girlfriend is a seal. Completely abstract. And it wasn't saying anything about their weight or anything like that. I don't even think I was dating anybody at the time. It was more about the sound of the words, the way it just rolled off the tongue, like My Chick Cecile. And I said, wait a minute, that could also mean like Cecile, like the song Cecilia from Simon & Garfunkel, like My Chick Cecile. And you know, I suppose saying chick nowadays is kind of like, but again, we were young and just naive, and we're like, ooh, that sounds like a really good name.
Band names are always very interesting.
Well, and we made it worse because we didn't write it the way it sounded. We didn't want it to mean either one of those. We didn't want it to mean my girlfriend Cecile or my girlfriend Cecile. We wanted it to be its own word. And so we moved the Y and the I around and changed it, and we wrote it as one word. So if you can visualize this, it was spelled Michyk
Well, that would be a nightmare now with trying to look it up on Facebook, any social media thing.
Yeah, it's just like my last name. Like the spelling on posters or in the newspaper, especially when we were touring, like they just butchered it. They never got it right, and I mean it was our own fault. But when people, it's funny because they would see it on a poster, the word, and then they would hear it, and if you were with them and they saw the word when you said it, then they were like, oh, I get it. It's the long I, like mice. My chick Cecile, I see it. But they never made the word and sound connection.
So besides that band, what other ones have you been in?
Well, Gomucio Henderson, I was playing, after the band split up, I was just playing solo. Mm-hmm. And I ran into Mike Henderson at the Rum Boogie. And I had a Wednesday night solo gig there. They mostly had DJs at that place. And Mike happened to be there one night, and his buddies were like, hey, you should play with our friend Mike. He's really good. And so he showed up and sat in with me for a while. And yeah, Mike and I played for close to 5 years. And toward the end, we added bass and drums. So we played as a 4-piece. And I don't know, it's hard. Sometimes it was Eddie Gomucio, sometimes it was Eddie Gomucio Band. I think toward the very end, we settled on the name Eddie Gomucio and the Electrics. Mm-hmm.
And that's what you have now.
Yeah. And that, I always liked names like that, where it was kind of like the songwriter with like this sort of entity, like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, or Elvis Costello and the Imposters, or is it the Imposters? I forget now. No, Elvis Costello and the Attractions. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, I always gravitated to that because it really was like kind of a songwriter-based band, and most of the songs I brought to the table, and then we kind of worked around them. But yeah, as you say, the Electrics now, me, Tim Datema, Josh Nimmo, and Ben Carroll, we've been together the longest, longer than my chick Cecile, longer than Mike, and even our first inception of the Electrics. As we stand with these 4 guys, we've been Eddie Gomucio and the Electrics for, gosh, probably close to 15 years, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's great because, you know, sometimes we only play like 4 times a year.
Right.
But it's like putting on an old pair of sneakers. It just, I mean, we just fall right back in. We've got it. It's like we feed off one another really well. It's been great.
Wow. So we were talking about, well, off camera, when we were talking about, we actually met each other at the Abyss or somewhere around there. It's the Abyss. And JP always comes around every now and then.
Yeah.
But did you ever play there? What are the bars that you used to play back when you first got that band, this last band together?
Mike and I played the Abyss all the time. Mm-hmm. We had a regular gig there, I think on Thursdays. And then JT would rotate us on weekends. Like we would do a Friday here, a Saturday there. So we would do random weekends. But I want to say, I don't even remember all the venues, but for about 3 years straight, maybe 2.5 years straight, Mike and I played out Monday through Sunday.
Wow, so you were just constantly.
Yeah, like every night we had a gig. Some of the places aren't even around anymore, but I know one of them. Well, on Wednesday nights, I think we were at the Buco. I think Thursdays was the Abyss. Tuesdays, I think, was like Carol's Pub and Cully's. We had two shows. We had an early show and then a late show. Yeah, it was. And then the weekends always varied.
So what do you feel is different from back then to now on how the music scene has been?
I mean, it's certainly grown. Maybe it was the same and I just didn't realize it because maybe I was just kind of in the whole mix. I think now, even though I'm still recording and writing the material and playing out off and on, that I think I have more time now to kind of outside looking in and kind of see, especially with the festivals, allowed me to sort of see a lot. And so with that idea or that perception, it does give this idea that like, oh wow, it's a lot bigger. And maybe it was back then. Also, we didn't have social media and internet the way it is now. It was very, in its nascent stages. So, maybe there were a lot of
bills. That was the way to promote.
Yeah, stapling the telephone pole.
Yeah. So let's talk about Queen City Shout a little bit.
Okay.
How long has it been going on, and what gave you the idea? Actually, yeah. Let's start with that. Is how long has it been going on? And
so this is our 10th year, but I think it technically started 14 years ago, only because the first 6 were consecutive, and then there was like a 3 or 4 year where it just went dormant. There was no festival, and then the last 4 have been consecutive again. So we are celebrating 10 years, but the festival started about 14 years ago, and it started out of Borders bookstore when I was still working there in retail. I was one of the managers there, and I proposed the idea to my GM about having this music festival during the month of February. It tends to be a slower time in retail after Christmas. And it's also around the same time that the festival season is starting with like South by Southwest and Coachella in May. So it gradually just gets bigger and bigger as it goes. And I thought, not that the festival out of the bookstore would even compare, but I just thought, hey, this is a good time. The festival season's kicking off. Let's do this. And I think I actually had in my head, I thought, well, this would be cool to catch a band that's either driving down to South by Southwest, or maybe making their way back from, and we could have them stop at the bookstore and do like a quick little like acoustic set. So I think that's where that idea sort of came, along with incorporating local music, which it's always been at the corner of it. We had bands and songwriters from Kansas City, Austin, Chicago featured this year, but the majority of it's been from around here.
So has it always gone, have you always tried to raise money for charity with this Queen City Shout?
No, the last 2 years we were at Borders is when we tied it in with a nonprofit, and it was the simple idea then. During the month of February, we partnered with The Kitchen, so they really were sort of our first nonprofit partner. And we did a canned good drive. So the idea was, people were coming into the bookstore. We couldn't charge a cover anyway. people were free to come into the bookstore. And so we just asked people as a cover charge to bring in canned goods. And we had The Kitchen had 2 barrels set up on either side of the cafe, and they just collect canned goods. And so we were successful. It was a simple idea, but after Borders and after that sort of dormant period, when I decided to bring it out into the city, really, I have my wife to thank for that, for really just pushing that idea and saying, go, do it, stop talking about it, kind of thing. She really planted the seed about she's always worked with a lot of the nonprofits that are part of the event. She was the homeless liaison for Springfield Public Schools for 5 years. And so she really kind of gave me this idea of like, let's not make it about one nonprofit, maybe think about the whole umbrella, like this whole idea of like several agencies that work for poverty relief. And I thought, yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So that's all her.
So you usually have it on Commercial Street, and this past one, it was all online because of COVID, and I know we talked about this on our last interview. Now, we really enjoyed, going out on the scene on Commercial Street, and yeah, we had some problems with the video and everything, but it was still really cool to see people still trying to go to like White River that had live music, and even at Kiwanateca they were doing art gallery with Chris Palmer, so we got to have a quick little interview over there. But it was really fantastic. So how much money did you guys end up raising?
So far just under 4,000. So our goal was 15, and that, as I mentioned before the festival, it wasn't an arbitrary number. Last year we raised just over 10,000, and that was an in-person festival.
Yeah.
So I knew that the virtual festival might be a little harder because we weren't charging at the door. We were just asking people to contribute to the GoFundMe. But I thought, let's shoot for 5,000 more. Let's make it 15,000 and see how we do. But through the GoFundMe, we've raised just under 4,000. People can go there still and see what the total amount is. But we're closing that down this week. But we also have income coming in from our shop, our Queen City shop. So we had a lot of swag. We had T-shirts, stickers, posters. So once we have all that finalized, I'm going to post our final numbers. But I want to say, with all of that, it'd probably be maybe just over 4,000, maybe closer to like 4,500, something like that. And so then we'll split that among the nonprofits that we partnered with.
That's fantastic. And I know that takes a lot of work to organize and coordinate and stuff. So was it a lot harder or easier to do it online than it versus, in person?
This year felt like it was harder. I don't know if it was just due to COVID or what. Everyone's been under a lot of stress, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety out there, and it's been a roller coaster ride emotionally for all of us, I think, and I'm certainly there as well. But I think transitioning in July to making it all virtual, it was just kind of like hit the ground running again. So in some ways it felt very much like the first festival, where it was like, okay, we kind of know what we're doing, but we'll see what happens. So looking back in terms of like stages and things and the way things ran, I thought it worked really well. Are there some things we might have changed? Probably, but yeah. Always
a learning process.
Yeah, for sure. But to your original question, it probably, about the same kind of hard work as the others. It was just different. And I think part of it being different maybe made it seem bigger than it was, or more stressful than it normally would be.
Well, during quarantine, you had the Queen City Shout open mic, and it was basically the same setup where you had slots where people would just go live on the page. So we kind of had a running start with already knowing how to put the platform together, and that was really awesome. I enjoyed, and I know a lot of other people enjoyed tuning into that because we were all stuck at home and we missed going out and seeing our favorite musicians play. And it was really, really cool to see people at their homes, you know, just jamming out. And that was fantastic. So thank you for putting that on. Do you think they're still going to have that go on again, maybe? Hopefully we won't quarantine again, but maybe online open mic.
Yeah, I don't know, unless there's another quarantine, which I am not hoping for.
Yeah,
there was good and bad to it, but I think it lent itself to the idea of being in quarantine in terms of the sign-ups and the numbers and filling the slots, because for the first 2 months, easily, like March and April, we had slots open Monday through Sunday, and they always filled. And then it gradually, as things opened up through May and June, it got slower and slower. And then we changed it to, like, I think Thursday through Sunday or something like that. So definitely want to bring back the open mic. We might do it as maybe a showcase on a set evening instead of doing it the whole week. Just because I don't know that there's an audience anymore. People are getting out as they should. And, you know, for as many musicians that played, certainly from one-on-one conversations, there's a lot of musicians that loved doing it, and others that are like, well, I'm doing this just to keep my name out there, but if I had a choice, I would much rather be out live. And so those, easily half of who signed up, those musicians and songwriters are taking advantage of the fact that, hey, I can get back out and do what I love, which is great, which is absolutely great. So, you know, and I get it. I mean, sometimes songwriters want that reaction. They want to hear the clanging of the plates and the silverware and the glass, and they want to hear the back talk at the back of the room and all that.
Right. It's the atmosphere.
The atmosphere.
It's really the atmosphere. So let's see. Besides Queen City Shout, do you have any other big projects coming up or you're involved in?
I do. I don't. They're kind of here, so I don't want to really speak to them. But they're probably before the end of the year. There'll be some more news coming out. Some of it personally as a songwriter with some stuff that I'm working on, but then also things related to music and to the festival. I mean, I've said it before. I'm just a big music dork. Outside of my own pursuits, like I like just being in it at all times. So yeah, I'll keep everybody posted.
Let's see. Based on what you have seen over the last few months, do you believe there is long-term potential behind streaming music events on a local scale? So let me say that again, because somebody asked me this through SAMI, one of the SAMI members did. So based on what you have seen over the last few months, do you believe there is a long-term potential behind streamed music events on a local scale?
Yeah, definitely. And it can be a very simple idea like the open mic, maybe not in the way that it was, maybe in a different way. And it can also be in more of a 3-4 camera angle type setup where you've got, you know, an actual engineer and a sound guy behind the board and making sure it's all, and you've got lights, and where you could at that point maybe even charge to get in for someone to get onto the site and view this, especially for a lot of people, you know, COVID or no COVID. I think this idea of reaching audiences that may not be able to get to bigger cities, Springfield included. I mean, I'm not talking Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago. I mean, there's a lot of rural areas around here where people, they've told me, even through the open mic, they've said, man, this is great that you guys have this going on, because it's rare that we'll get up to Springfield to see live music. I mean, maybe twice a year. So the fact that I can just tune in, I think that same audience around this greater area is wanting something like that, you know, not just an open mic, but they're like, yeah, I'd pay to see some local shows that are being broadcast from, I don't know, Lindbergh's or, you know, other places like that. So yeah, I think the potential's definitely there.
Yeah, I believe that too, and it's really cool to see. Again, it's cool to see where they end up filming from. You know, with the background lights. I don't know if you know Randall Shreve, but he made a whole production kind of with his background. It was very, I don't know, just it fit with his music, the ambiance, and it was just really, really cool. And it was a different feel than what you would get when you see him at Folk Fest, you know, with a different background. So
yeah.
I like to see what people come up with. And it's
he
more of
is,
an intimate way of, you know, seeing the artist too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And he, you know, speaking of Randall, I mean, he is just an innovator, and he doesn't just think about the song, which his songs are amazing, but he thinks about the elements that go into that. I think Molly does that as well.
Yeah, Molly.
In a lot of her presentations. Prismatics, they're a young group. I think they put a lot of thought into their image, if you will. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it's, you know, it's important, I think, for a lot of artists, if they so choose, if that's sort of their direction, to think about what that looks like. You know, do we have lights? Do we have fog machines? Do we have, you know, whatever? What's my background? So.
Right. Always keep the audience, you know, watching.
Mm-hmm.
You know, keep your eye on them. What is your vision for the music scene, and what do you feel you are doing to change it for the better?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I don't really have a vision. I mean, I'm just little old Eddie Gomucio, and I have my own hopes and aspirations, as everybody does, in and outside of music. I love this community. I love my fellow musicians and artists, and so I just want us to be recognized, all of us. I don't care what your style is. I've said this before, and it's not meant in any disrespectful way to Nashville or Austin, but they have such a long, storied history. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we do. I mean, if people watch that documentary by Dave Hoekstra, folks that don't know about the Ozarks Jubilee and things like that, you know, all the way up through Ozark Mountain Daredevils and Lou Whitney and the Skeletons and the Morels, and it pretty much ends a couple of years ago when they came to visit us at Queen City Shout, kind of saying, "Hey, what's happening now?" Mm-hmm. And we're just a segment of what's happening now. I mean, with SAMI and what you guys are doing, you know, Krista and her FCC, full circle concept. So, you know, there's a lot of innovators and a lot of people that want to see the community and the music scene and artists in general just thrive. So, yeah, I mean, my vision really is more of a unified vision, I think. I think it's about, I think of it more as like, I don't know if people remember Bright Eyes, and they had that co-op up there in Omaha, Saddle Creek. And so they had a co-op of bands. It was everybody in it together. So you needed sound production, taken care of. You needed recording avenues, taken care of. You needed publishing and booking assistance, taken care of. Everyone was kind of helping each other out. And it would be great to see our community working more cohesively that way, where it's just like egos aside and personal interests aside, and it's like let's work together to make this all more successful in whatever fashion. Long term, I mean, I just hope to see the community growing and getting bigger. I think it's natural. The city's growing. It's a natural course, pre and post COVID. The university numbers are growing. More students are coming down here. So it's not the Springfield from 20 years ago.
Right, when the square was basically dead. It was very dead. I remember when I first started getting on the scene here. Like, wow, there's nothing going on. And I'm from Boulder, Colorado, so big city, and Denver, and yeah, this was a big change too.
Yeah, that's a hub.
Yeah, it's a culture shock for sure. I guess that kind of answers the other question I had. Where do you hope to see Springfield music, the Springfield area music, where do you hope to see the Springfield music scene in 5 to 10 years?
I hope all my brothers and sisters in the arts are just making names for themselves, getting out there, being recognized, seeing their audiences increase, creating. If there's any long-term hope for the scene, and I'll speak beyond music, is I want Springfield to be an art community, not just a part of the city, not just a neighborhood. I want us to be seen as a thriving artistic community, and that takes support and recognition from our fellow citizens, in terms of, like, I'm going to put down the Spotify, I'm going to put down the Apple Music, I'm going to put down my YouTube, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to experience. I mean, I said this in the documentary years ago, and I think you would agree that, I mean, you guys are on the scene, you see it pretty much every night. I mean, and I think it's going to come back that way, even bigger and better after COVID. We see what's happening with the Outland now, which is great. But I think that we need that support. And any night you go out, it really is, I always gravitate to food, but it really is like an appetizer, like a sampler of, hey, go check out, get some bluegrass here, get some blues here, go check out some jazz here, get some singer-songwriter folk stuff going on here, get your hip-hop over here. I mean, it's happening. And I'm not just talking about cover bands. I mean, that's great that they do what they do. I'm talking about live, original music. It's here.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there any advice that you could give somebody that is just now trying to make a name for themselves here in Springfield?
Wow.
With all your experience and everything like that, what things would you tell them not to do and more to focus on?
I would just say focus on, being you, and that may seem, stereotypical, but it's like people can get lost in sort of, I know I just talked about this idea of creating a backdrop and a scene and an artistic quality to your music and to what you want to present. That's all fine. It is. You don't have to just be, here I am with my guitar. I think both of those work, as long as you're being sincere and as long as you're being real, because people see through that. If I were to put on makeup and dress in black and try to do fog machines and things like that, that might speak to a lot of what influenced my own music, like The Cure and bands like that, but it's not who I am. So I can speak to that as an influence, but it's not what I want to portray as an artist. So that would be my advice, really, is just to be yourself, and whatever that may be. And be patient. Be patient. And I learned this early on too, because I'm not gonna lie, but I think when you're really young, you have these delusions of grandeur, and you're like, oh, stadiums, MTV, yeah. And if that's your long-term goal, then you're not doing it for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. Like, if you want to make a living off of your music, then find a way to make a living off your music. If that starts with busking, if that starts with playing out Monday through Sunday, and it's just a constant till you get some recognition, if that means touring a little bit and sleeping in the backseat of your car, hey man, props. So, yeah. But make sure that it's about that and not, I'm doing all this to eventually get to this. Because I think it's like anything that, they say that a lot of the wealthiest people are the most unhappy because they always give themselves some arbitrary number. They're like, oh, well, when I reach 2 million, I'll be happy. And then they reach that. They're like, well, no, I'm not happy. I think if I had 4 million. And then they get 4 million. And like, no, I'm not happy. I think if I had 10 million. And you're like, what? Yeah. So that may not connect, but I think from an artistic standpoint, it's like you have to do it for the right reasons. And obviously you want to be, if you want to make a living off of it, make sure that those ideals of why you want to make a living off of it are for the right reasons, and not for like popularity or because you want to be famous or because, and I think in some circles that's what's sold to the kids, whether it be sports or whether it be music or anything else, like entertainment and sports. I think a lot of that is sold to the kids. It's like, you could be the next. Yeah. You could be the next. And I don't subscribe to that. I'm not saying that you can't be a professional and you can't make yourself sort of come across that way, but I just don't subscribe to the idea of like doing it for stardom, if that makes sense. Right.
Is there anything else that you would like to add that I didn't ask or?
No, yeah, I appreciate the questions.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Eddie, for coming on here again and doing an interview. Because this does help out the people that do have questions about the music scene that aren't very familiar with it, haven't been here as long as me and you have, So it really helps, and we'll probably ask you on again another time. So I just want to say thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, and I appreciate the time.
And of course, and thank you again for having us out for Queen City Shout.
That was great. Yeah. I'm glad you guys were on board with like, yeah, let's do this, because I did not know how it was going to go. We had some live feeds that worked and some that didn't, but I was just like, eventually,
yeah, it was all trial and error. We didn't know what we were doing either. But thank you again for being on the scene with me for our interview, and we will talk to you again.
Thanks, Dominique.
Bye.